experience. And that, too, by the way, is a perfect segue. Because that's exactly what it kind of, he's been writing treatments for commercials. It's a real art.
What really struck me with this film in particular is it's far down the road in your collaborations with Chris Nolan. So flashing back to early film, let's take Memento. And the collaboration is something that's going to mature over film after film after film. I'm curious if you just talk us through a little bit about that process of maturation of the collaboration from where you guys started together that leads us to then something like this and what you're prepping now.
Yeah, I think, the process of maturation, as you said, really, it's not a given when you first meet that person, when you first started working with that director. And I think we were fortunate enough that we were like-minded. I think that's what we saw when we did Memento together, Chris hired me for Memento based on a film I had done called The High Line, which Barbara Boyle was the producer on, actually. And Chris saw that about a year later, and based on my work, he hired me for Memento. And so we really neither of us knew what we were getting into. I had seen Following, his first film, at that point, and really appreciated his work and knew that there was something very special about the narrative. And he liked the way I shot, High Line. So that's really was our starting point, but really had no idea what we were getting into in a working relationship. He'd never worked with a director of photography before. He'd shot his own picture. He'd never worked with a script supervisor, with a editor before. He cut his own film. So it was all of it was a very new process to him. And really, there was some tangling on Memento and trying to find the best way to do it, but I think we realized it was a good collaboration. And then by the second film, which was Insomnia, it definitely grew to the next level.
I was very intrigued by the choices that you made and how real everything looked. So there was never a distinction between levels 3 or 2 or 1. Did you all feel the same way about it? Yeah, I thought that was a very, very interesting choice. You want to talk a little bit more about how you and Chris, in other words, when you first read the script, what intrigued you the most about it? And then how did you sit down with your director to really develop this look and feel?
Yeah, I mean, that was what was important to him in the beginning, was that everything felt very real. He didn't want to distinguish in any way between dreams and reality, unless it was a point where we wanted to make it clear that we were in a dream. The bar sequence with the tilting, thing. And I not only played around with the changing light, but also in some more colorful light in there and some different things. So when we wanted to make it clear to the audience that they're in a dream, when the characters make it clear we're in a dream, then we have a little bit of license to play. Otherwise, everything was kept sort of on the same line. What was important to me, and really there aren't a lot of conversations that Chris and I have, because it really is sort of a we understand each other, and it works more in telepathy than anywhere else at this point.
Each other's dreams, or?
Yeah, but not quite that much, but we certainly share each other's vision and understand. I know when I read it on the page, I know exactly what he's thinking in his head. I know how he sees it. In a strange way, I don't want to digress too far, but when I watch that end sequence on the airplane, I know exactly where that's coming from. It's not only this sort of Wizard of Oz, moment there, like the end of Wizard of Oz where all the characters pop up in the window and remember me.
And you were there?
Exactly. But it's actually, oddly enough, very reminiscent of what we go through on our productions. When we're all traveling in first class, exactly like that, and everybody's just sort of waking up, and you look over, and there's the production designer, and there's the director, and one of the producers, and myself. And so, strangely, everything that Chris draws on is from real experience. Oddly enough, when I see this for the 15th time or something, what I realize is it's completely taken from our experiences on location scouts or traveling from one country to another. So it's everything's very derivative. But to get back to what we were talking about in the dreams, one of the things that was important for me was the delineation between these different places, and I wanted to make sure that Chris, when he got in the cutting room, I was cutting back and forth, and I had no idea how quickly they were going to cut, how much they were going to linger between the van falling, the van on the streets in LA in the rain, the ski slopes in Calgary, and then the hotel hallway. So I wanted to create a palette for those areas and to distinguish each of them. And so naturally, the snow in Calgary is going to be pretty white, and that's going to be the most monochromatic of the environments. And then the hotel hallway, it made sense to shift that into a warm direction and play off of sort of warm fixtures on the wall and warm ceiling fixtures, and take that into a red-yellow area. And then so in the stuff in LA, it was a real challenge to shoot all that rainy footage in LA in the summer. And so I put a little bit of blue into that, so we had these three distinguished colors. There's monochromatic, there's yellow, red, and there's blue. So they're cutting back and forth. You kind of know where you are right away. Well, we shot the slow motion stuff mostly with Photosonics cameras, film cameras. We shot a little bit with the Phantom camera, and a lot of the data was lost. And the film cameras, turns out none of the data was lost. It went into the lab and came back out, and there it was. Whereas the Phantom camera was a bunch of technicians going like this. We don't know how it didn't get recorded. So that was really upsetting to Chris. Yeah, technology can have its downers, exactly. But we went in filming at speeds up to 1,500 frames per second. But strangely, we ended up using about the 760 frames per second more than anything else. In some cases, it was interpolated, and they created a higher frame rate out of a lower frame rate that we'd filmed at.
It's a really nice blend between the visual effects and the mechanical effects. It gives an authenticity to it where it's not all just, in a world that everything is possible, therefore impossible, the way we're experiencing it, there's an organic reality to it, which I think is really quite lovely.
Yeah, no, I think that really is the philosophy that Chris embraces and that I really enjoy, which is you try to get it in camera first. You do everything you can to get it in camera, and then you resort to visual effects, or in this case, things that are completely created, as a visual effect, and are so surreal that they can't be accomplished. Folding over a Paris street, for instance, then it is designed as a visual effect shot. But Chris goes to great lengths, probably too far in some cases, to do things as a mechanical effect. Going back to Dark Knight, we had a scene where Batman jumps off the roof of a building in Hong Kong, and spreads his wings and flies across the city. And initially, Chris wanted to do it 100% practically. And so we actually, they all worked it out. The stunt coordinator and the effects guy worked it out. We were going to have 2 helicopters. The stuntman, for Batman, was going to jump off of the roof on a descender rig from a helicopter. And so the second he jumped off, the helicopter was in motion, was going to pull him forward. They had done rehearsals. We had a second camera ship following with the camera, with an IMAX camera, no less. All I'm saying. And it was actually all worked out, and they'd even begun rehearsals, and it was really, the city of Hong Kong had pulled the plug on it. No, no, you're not flying that guy and a camera over our city, and so we ended up doing his plate shots and green screen work.
Before we open it up, I have one more question, which is, actually it's a kind of a 2-part question. Just to talk a little bit about how you got your start, and if you have any advice for our students about getting into the industry. And we have amazing students here, and then we'll open it up to all of you.
Well, I got my start. I actually, from high school, I went right to working at a television station as a production assistant. And I put my schooling off for a few years, and I eventually came back and I went to AFI for cinematography after years. But I kind of followed this track and went to this television station. I became a news cameraman, and the first job I had was I was shooting the 6 and 11 news, on studio cameras, and I became a news cameraman, and then in Washington D.C. and then I did documentaries for a number of years. And then I went to AFI's cinematography program, and it was really a bunch of the people that I met there at the time that sent things in motion. And I met Janusz Kaminski there and Faden Papamichael. And those guys were just getting into Roger Corman's sort of school at the time. So we all, there was a group of us, myself and Faden Papamichael, Janusz Kaminski, and Mauro Fiore. And we all worked on each other's films and worked as grips and electrics and, and eventually shooting second unit for each other. And that was a great factory at the time. And it's a shame that they're not around and doing it anymore. But at least at that time, when I was breaking into movies in the late 80s and early 90s, there was this straight-to-video market, so you could just hammer out a ton of low-budget pictures and get into that. And I'm not sure how much of that exists anymore. So what's difficult for me these days is to to say specifically what the course should be. But I know that clearly the philosophy is the same. It really is perseverance and really knowing what you're going after and doing as much as you can. Work on as many short films as you can. Work on as many productions as you can. And don't be afraid to work on jobs that are not particularly in the discipline you might head towards. It's phenomenal to me when I look back. When I came to Hollywood, and wanted to get in the movie business, I was sort of sad that I had wasted so many years as a news cameraman. And then within years found out that all that experience became the foundation of what I do now. And every bit of that handheld camera that's up there was training that I got 28 years ago when I was working as a news cameraman. And every bit of what you do, and we were discussing this today about having a well-rounded foundation, everything that you do fills that reservoir that you can tap from later on. And so I think that doing documentary work is important, and writing is important, and music is important. And I'm a musician, and I have been my entire life, and I continue to play. And I really firmly believe that contributes to the creativity that I'm able to put into the images. So I would say just keep doing it. Don't get lazy. Don't sit and play on Facebook all day long. And work on movies.